Hello, my name is Austin, and today I want to talk about how the ACT is changing the process by which they evaluate students with disabilities for accommodations. I believe that hopefully this will trickle down to the SAT, GRE, and other standardized exams. So what's happening here with the ACT is that originally what they would do is you would submit your documentation and then the ACT would evaluate that documentation. I believe that they may have had independent reviewers or just had people on staff who evaluate the student's documentation and whether it supports the accommodations, and they'd make a determination. The issue with this process is that it is not interactive. If you look at students from high school going to college, they're meeting with the campus disability office, they're having an intake evaluation where the student sits down with the disability coordinator, and they go through a process of getting to know each other, getting to understand, and asking questions about how these accommodations will support the student. So they're taking into account what the student is saying and providing feedback on as part of their process for evaluating the strength of the accommodation request and whether it should be approved or not. In this case, with the ACT and most standardized testing, there is no formal process like that. It's just looking at the student's record for documentation and then making that determination whether the accommodation should be permitted or not. And so what the ACT is doing now is they are saying basically that if the student submits, the student can submit their accommodations for high school, and those accommodations will carry over into their exam. So whatever accommodations they had for high school, they should pretty much carry over directly to the ACT examinations. And I think that is a much fairer process because in high school, there's a much more interactive dialogue. Obviously the high school has look at documentation as well, but they also really get to know the student and know what accommodations work best for them. So letting them make that determination and them just kind of supporting the recommendations that have already been provided makes a lot more sense than trying to do this independent review where there's no interactive process. And I also will say that a lot of these independent reviews generally, or at least used to have stipulations with the documentation having an expiration date. This documentation is good for 5 years or whatever. That used to be the case. Now, for college disability offices and the standardized testing, there are generally no longer those, they don't mention a time limit for the documentation expiring, which makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, I have mild cerebral palsy. It doesn't change, in 5 years or something like that. So the documentation should still be good as long as it is relevant. And that's a much more what the focus is now with the laws and stuff. As long as the documentation remains relevant and can be used to support these accommodations, then they should continue and can be submitted rather than just putting a blanket 5-year or 7-year time limit. So I hope that what the ACT is doing will trickle down to the SAT, GRE, and other standardized testing. And please check out the links for more information. And thank you so much for watching.